On behalf of the Mendocino Coast Model Railroad and Historical Society, we welcome you to our presentation on Redwood Railways. I'm Katy, a retired librarian, a historian, and a museum docent. I'm also the author of Rails Across the Noyo and the Logging Railroads of Humboldt and Mendocino County. This is a quick glance at North Coast Railroad history, and it was developed for model railroaders. I chose views of unusual rail features and rolling stock to provide ideas for dioramas and trackside features on model railroads. Our group realized there was a wider audience that would enjoy this presentation. Our first view to share with you is the Excelsior Railroad in Humboldt County. This was not an average everyday photograph. This was strictly set up for the photographer that was going to be on the scene that day. You have individual logs cut into sections, you have spars for sailing ships, and you have lumber all in the picture. This contraption on the right side of the photograph is a vessel by the name of the Morrow. Once logs were rolled down into Big River in Mendocino County, they could be floated down to the sawmill. In 1915, the movie industry arrived to film a silent film called Promise and wanted a post photograph of the flat-bottom steamer Morrow with a log raft and a locomotive. The Morrow was run with a steam donkey engine and ran from 1907 to 1938 on Big River. You might look at this photograph and go, what in the name of creation is that? Is this a locomotive? When a lumber company needed an engine to work in tight spaces, the Casper South Fork and Eastern engine number 8 was made from a gasoline-powered Federal truck and used as a switcher on incline track segments at the headwaters of Big River in Mendocino County. This engine could pull 2 loaded cars of logs short distances. Looking down the incline at Greenwood Creek at a carload of lumber sliding down to the ship Alcazar under the landing wires at the wharf's end, the shed on the left was the home of a mule named Maud, whose horsepower hauled the empty cars back uphill to the mill. Over the years, there were many mules named Maud that lived in that little house. Rather than being cut into lumber, whole chunks of trees were dispatched to the Chicago World Columbian Exposition on board the steamship National City to convey to the public the size of logs. Humboldt County had a display room on the exposition grounds to show timber production and photos of the forests and the lumber camps. This is an example of a clear-cut board from the Clark Redwood Company, Clark and Dolbeer in Eureka, again made to show the public the size of clear-cut boards you could get from redwood trees. It is believed that the McKay Mill in Humboldt County was responsible for this photograph that was embossed on their stationery. The image was to impress prospective buyers in the East with the size of redwood trees. The horse was blindfolded and backed up a temporary ramp into the hole. The photo was taken and the horse was led out. Even with a hole in the log, it had all kinds of merchantable value, and many trees and many pieces of lumber came from it. This is, on this photograph, the historic notation says, bridge on the Carson Road, 90-foot unbroken spans. Carson's was the name of a location on Lindsay Creek near Fieldbrook in Humboldt County. Dolbeer and Carson owned 24 square miles of timberland, so the precise location of railways was often unclear. The timber company survived from 1864 to 1950. Another shot, similar to the one we started with, was a photograph by photographer A.W. Erickson showing a log train a log train headed to the Excelsior Redwood Company in Freshwood, northeast of Eureka. This was again taken to show customers back east how big the logs were. At Glendale, west of Blue Lake in Humboldt County, a man from the Miner Mill and Lumber Company takes a break from running a Globe Iron Works gypsy engine and invites someone to sit inside of his log. The engine spool has pulled a carload of logs. Even hollow logs like this one had commercial value. In 1903, this strawberry trestle was 93 feet high on the Northern Humboldt Railway. The engine came by steamer from San Francisco to Eureka and was brought up Mad River on a scow and ran for another 40 years. The drive mechanism on the Shay locomotive is on the other side of the engine. Shays were versatile locomotives that could be run on coal or oil or wood. They were slow but powerful, and they gave maximum traction with minimum weight. In outlying woods camps that had family housing, if you wanted to go to town on Saturday for shopping or social occasions, you took the lumber company's rail car. Any contraption with flanged wheels and a power source would work. The folks were 5 miles east of Grinnell in Humboldt County when they took off for town. Perhaps the most iconic photograph of railroad construction in Humboldt County was this shot of the bulky trestle stretching towards Dow's Prairie. Little River Redwood Company proclaimed that this was the highest single spile polar piling bridge in the world at the time it was built around 1906. The locomotive engineers hated it, saying it wobbled and drove very slowly over it. What the heck is this? In 1893, this was a steam-powered inspection vehicle, and it was created for Humboldt Lumber Company's Mr. Zaruba to transport him down the 11,000-foot wharf into Humboldt Bay. 3 timber companies worked together to build the wharf into the waters deep enough for sailing vessels and to take on a load. The biggest locomotive ever built in Eureka, California was number 11 for the Oregon and Eureka Railway, and it arrived in a box, literally. The components came from all over the United States, and for 5 months in 1911, it was put together in the Samoa rail shops of the Hammond Lumber Company. The engineers did a good job assembling it, and it ran for 39 years. The oxen in this picture are about as big as the gypsy engine. They would soon replace it in the Elk River area of Humboldt County. Built by Marshurts and Cantrell Iron Works in San Francisco about 1880, it was retired in 1927, and it still runs. The Timber Heritage Association at Samoa on Humboldt Bay steams it up for special events. Bound for Humboldt's Excelsior Lumber Mill, the Humboldt Logging Railroad exits the woods with a full load. The engine is off to the left. The Baldwin engine was built as an 042T in 1884 and was rebuilt as a 242T in 1892 and later worked in the Mendocino County until 1918. At Scotia, on the Eel River in Humboldt County, if the 500-foot tall crumbling sandstone bluffs are not sloughing down on the tracks, the river will rise and try to wash the tracks away. In 1964, floodwaters were 11 feet over the tracks here and erased 30 miles of railroad. In 177 days and with $12 million, 850 men rebuilt the railroad. It was abandoned in the 1980s. Along with redwood lumber, there was a market for tan oak bark. This bark was boiled down and used to tan hides into leather. At the mouth of the Mattole River in Humboldt County, the bark operators ran train tracks right down the beach to a 2,000-foot wharf that was their shipping point. Storms washed the beach tracks away every winter, and they were rebuilt every spring for 10 years at the start of the last century. Why does this U.S. Navy cruiser have a railroad built into its side? It was firmly stuck and could not be moved. The USS Milwaukee was 420 feet long, 66 feet wide, and a total loss. Salvaged were its 10-ton guns and armaments and anything that was usable in 1916. This was on the north spit of Humboldt Bay. Oops. Actually, this Huala Lumber Company engine on the south coast of Mendocino County was rescued by a contraption called a Lawson Flyer, a stationary steam engine on a rail car controlling 8,000 feet of wire rope. It was righted and placed back on tracks again. The ladies are enjoying a ride to town in a 1914 Oldsmobile runabout turned rail car. Up from Greenwood Elk on Mendocino's central coast were miles of rail line leading to outlying lumber camps with family. Trestle building was no problem when you had unlimited access to timbers. This was one of the reputed 101 bridges on 19 miles of Elk Creek Railroad at 100 feet high and 400 feet long. Using design techniques adapted from sailing ship construction, trestle supports called cripples and bents affix railroad tracks 150 feet over the ocean, heading to the shipping point at Greenwood Elk in the 1890s. This is how autos were delivered to Mendocino County. Arriving on a ship, they rode on the Albion Lumber Company's railroad from the wharf to the track's end near Navarro, then were driven inland. There is a Model T Roadster, a 1920 Buick, a 1922 Marmon, a 1912 Dodge, a 1914 Ford Roadster, and a 1920 Franklin. With no rail connection to the outside world, this is how a locomotive arrived on the Mendocino coast in 1905, in pieces. It was taken to an engine house where it was assembled into a functional locomotive. In 1923, another railroad engine arrived by ship after having been remodeled from a wood burner to an oil burner. Once unloading like this, a Union Lumber Company engine in Fort Bragg was dropped through the wharf into the surf, but it was reclaimed. Railroads in the Redwoods moved entire logging camps from one location to another. Sleeping cabins fit right onto the rail cars. Bigger buildings like the cookhouse shops and dining halls were moved in halves. This is on the Mendocino County's Big River in 1912. This 1926 photograph shows 118,000 railroad ties awaiting sale. Rail travel and railroad extensions were losing out to highways and autos. This piece of log in Mendocino County was too big to fit on a rail car. A powder monkey, an explosive expert, is drilling on top of the log to insert dynamite and blast it into pieces. Boom. Taken in 1882, this photo shows viewers the result of the powder monkey's efforts. Now, the still merchantable wood pieces were lighter and more movable. In 1884, this trestle on the Casper and Hare Creek Railroad was a favorite photo location. The carts in front of the engine were for moving tan oak bark. In 1906, the jug handle trestle folded like an accordion. Locals were irritated when vandals day later burnt all the timbers in a fire. The Casper Lumber Company rebuilt it immediately. In 1905, the California Western Railroad was today's skunk train and was created to go from Fort Bragg to Willits in Mendocino County. The engine was a 460, and in 1911, it pulled the first passenger train from Fort Bragg to Willits to hook up with the Northwestern Pacific Railroad. In 1922, this photo on the California Western Line showed two big 262 Baldwins framing a tiny 244T Baldwin from the 1880s. The little one was a maintenance of way engine for North Spur and Alpine. An 040 Gypsy engine passes the Cottoniba Lumber Company's store near Rockport. The engine came without a cab, and the lumber company had to build one. The gear assembly on the front could pull a log right up to the tracks. A mill at Rockport existed from 1877 into the 1950s. A locomotive on a river? As track construction along the Eel River in Humboldt County for the Northwestern Pacific Railroad progressed, locomotives provided the power for steam equipment like rock drills. They barged the engine upstream, built a short track to unload it, and used the engine for the power to dig a tunnel and had it ready to go when the track laying crews arrived. Just to prove that Redwood Railways occasionally hauled something other than lumber, here are the wine grapes headed to the wineries. Of course, these grapevines grew up redwood grape stakes 6 feet tall. Some wineries built tank cars to ship bulk wines. Tie whacking, the slow, tedious, back-breaking process of splitting railroad ties, can be seen in this photo taken near Manchester on Mendocino's south coast. Jack Screw's wooden wedges called gluts aided this man in 1909. For an 8-foot long tie, 6 by 8 inches in dimensions, a tie whacker would receive less than 50 cents. On an especially busy day, a man might earn $8. Today, the site of Rockport is invisible off of Highway 1 on the north coast of Mendocino County. In 1877, it contained an architectural marvel, one of the first iron cable suspension bridges west of the Mississippi River. It gave access to offshore rocks and a wire lumber loading chute. The bridge was 270 feet long, 23 feet high, and lasted 2 years. Picnic excursions gave loggers and mill workers and their families something to look forward to. Patriotic bunting on the car may indicate a 4th of July excursion. Timber companies maintained picnic grounds in unlogged groves of trees. The train was sponsored by the Albion Lumber Company and was headed towards Anderson Valley.
John Henry, he was a little baby boy. You could hold him in the palm of your hand. And his papa